Some of us were taught to call manipulation love just because it came wrapped in attention, secrecy, and big promises. And I think this is especially true in the Black community because of the other systemic things going on: oppression, racism, limited opportunities, etc. And that is exactly why conversations like the one I'm about to have about Brandy and Wanya have hit such a nerve. Because once grown women look back with adult eyes, a whole lot of what used to get romanticized starts looking really predatory. Hey lovelies, this is Janelle, the relationship coach behind The Successful Invisible. And I'm here today with another episode of Response and React. Brandy was 16, Wanya was 22, and people are still calling that love. She wasn't fast, she was groomed. This is not about being messy or sensational. It is about learning how to recognize when a man is using power, confusion, flattery, and emotional inconsistency to get access to somebody who should have been protected. If this kind of breakdown helps with putting language to red flags and sharpening discernment, there's more depth, coaching style reflections, and exclusive content waiting inside my exclusive coaching community on Coffee.
Brandy and Wanya is something I really want to talk about as somebody who has been groomed before. And for the women who are currently outside on the other side of that, you're going to understand this. At 16, 15 years old, there are grown men around you who want to be in a relationship and date you. You understand that. And they always, and I talk about this on my podcast, they always go around people. Like, people think because Brandy was in a fortunate situation and she was maybe accomplished, maybe had money, and was surrounded by these people. Predators, how many times do I have to tell y'all this? Predators know their prey. It doesn't matter their financial situation. It doesn't matter anything. They can look at you. When you think about grooming, I need you to think and put yourself in the mind of a lion who is watching a gazelle. They know that's how their brain works. The issue is victims don't know that they're being victimized. And somebody who is 15 in a space, predators bank on this too. Somebody who's 15 in a space, definitely going through puberty, wanting to make their own mark in the world, is prime time. Prime time for a predator to pretend they're empowering that person and take advantage of them. She talked about several times, Brandy talked about how he promised. It's called future promising, okay? Take notes, people, so you could be able to talk to your daughters and your nieces and the little girls in your community. It's called future promising. They bank on the fact that they're going to do X in this, like they're going to basically do A in X amount of time, right? So I want to do this, and they play victim. And somebody who is 15, 16 years old wants to help. They feel like they're in love. They want to try to do something because they're so young and they don't feel like people take them serious. So it's kind of like a goal for them to be able to, do something for this person that cares about them, that sees the real them. That's what grooming is. So they're the victim. Hey, I want to come out. I'm not able to because of this, because of that, because of this. And then the child starts using childlike reasoning. Y'all also have to understand this is a childlike reasoning to be like, okay, well, I just have to wait. At 18, I'm grown anyway. And she talked about how Wanya would make her promises about the fact that they were going to come out as a couple at 18, and he was just waiting on that. And she thought to herself, she wanted to protect him. And that is grooming. It's not like, oh, at 15 years old, I know better. That's a very predatory, like, that's such a predator thing to say. Because if you don't empathize with the fact that somebody 7 years older, who has lived 7+ years, who is close enough to know and remember what it meant to be 15 years old, but also know, to have the knowledge to know, we need to sneak around. Because when he got online and he started talking about them, we never did nothing. There was nothing like that happen until 18. Newsflash. Anybody who says something like they're going to wait until they're 18, already a predator. Because you're already telling me you find something attractive about this child, so attractive that you're going to wait. And they never wait. They never wait. So that's what grooming is. That's what a conversation needs to be opened up about. It's not about at 15, you knew better. That's why you were never tried, babe. And that's a good thing. And that's a position of privilege to be able to speak from that. And I envy you. But some people do not know better. And there are predators who can see that. So when we talk about Brandy and that being exposed on such a national level, think to yourself, even Naziah Harris, you never know who's around people and what's going on. So just look at it with empathy and not try to make it about her being a foolish teenager. She was the victim and she was taken advantage of. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to me too. Podcasts definitely talk about this topic quite often and tell this story quite often on my podcast. The link is in my bio.
Showing any romantic connection. Brandy writes of losing her virginity to Morris, now 52. She goes on to share that as the relationship progressed, he'd become prone to comparing her to other R&B singers, namely Mariah Carey, his One Sweet Day duet partner. He was also increasingly hard to track down, and she was required to page him prior to calling. So when you listen to this relationship, you realize even at 22 years old, Wanya was incredibly manipulative. She writes, "These are the things that with hindsight you realize are wildly obvious signs of something wrong. Neon warning signs that I chose to ignore because I didn't know what the hell I was doing or what he was doing with me. Just that I was in love, or what I believed was love." She says that the two split up after she discovered and he admitted that he was cheating. For years, she says that Morris had described their relationship as the young ingenue having a schoolgirl crush getting her heart broken. But that's not the case, she says. I believe he took advantage. The shame ends here. The silence ends here, she adds, of coming to terms with the feeling that she was manipulated into and throughout the relationship. I was not a fast girl with a crush. I was not a dramatic teenager who couldn't handle rejection. I was not an unstable, obsessive fan. I was a child and he was an adult. And it's time the world understood the difference. Here's the thing. To me, that was a mic drop in the end of that particular chapter. But let's revisit what Wanya said on an Instagram Live. Maybe, I think this was back in 2021. It was about 5 years ago.
Should I just
tell the story?
I'm going to tell the story. We like stuff like this, especially when people don't have any idea. Okay. Okay. So check this out. Brandy and I were friends in the beginning. Her mother and reached out to me, as well as my manager reached out to Brandy because Brandy was a big fan of mine. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because this young lady was pretty cool. Now I was young at the time. I wasn't 30 nothing, you know.
And it's so interesting watching this now based on how Brandy describes the relationship. You could definitely see in this particular instance, he's trying to downplay, he's trying to sugarcoat it. He's trying to put the onus on her. She was such a fan of mine and blah, blah, blah.
I'm saying, so don't get it twisted. Hold on 1 second. Can we keep it down? Because I can't hear. All right. So what happened is we actually, she became kind of like my little protege. You know what I mean? I'm actually the one that introduced her to Vita Spears and Ralph Fuqua.
And Brandy talks about this in the book as well.
Came to us to actually do a TV show on the UPN network. And I said, well, Brandy's down the hallway. And
if you were 16 and a grown-ass man was sneaking around with you, would you call that love or manipulation? Because some stories hit different when you get older, right? Because Brandy just let the cat out the bag. She says when she was 16 years old, Wanya Morris was messing with her at the time they were dating. 16. And he a whole grown-ass man at the time. Now, according to Brandy, it started as a friendship. Then they started sneaking around. And she says they both knew that this couldn't get out to nobody. And they were even planning to pretend that they were just friends until she turned 18. Now, here's the part that's kind of wild to me. Even more wild than what was already happening. Some people online are saying she knew better. She shouldn't have done it. She knew better. She was 16. At 16, you still asking permission to go hang out with your friends. And y'all talk about she knew better. No, that's not how this works. And even Brandy believes that she was taken advantage of. And now she's decided she's not going to let Wanya keep pushing this narrative that they were always just friends. And this ain't just industry stuff, because some people say that's how they do in the industry. This ain't just the industry. This happens in neighborhoods, schools, churches, everywhere. And now that Brandy is speaking up, right, it makes me wonder, how many other folks thought that they were in love when they were young, but they were really just being taken advantage of? Because this conversation needs to happen.
Okay, we're going to take this slow like we did yesterday. And I want to talk about some words and explain the meaning of those words and give some context as to how those words get lost in translation for us. I'm going to talk about adolescence. We're going to talk about age again of the folks who are involved. And yes, the calculator is back out. And then we're going to talk about how Adina Howard, in the way that we adultify Black young folks, suffered the most publicly at the time, not only based on people's perception of her, but with her career. And talk about how an older Black woman was at the center of that decision happening. And how do we think about the young Black man who was involved and name his choice and his decisions and his actions without, because everyone's struggling because they're like, oh, you're making it seem like, there was guns to people's heads. That extreme prevents us from great comprehension, because things rarely exist on the extreme. And so if it doesn't exist on the extreme, we don't know how to name it and we don't know how to claim it. And that means a lot of shit gets past us and we too grown and we know too much for that shit to be happening still. Let's talk about synonyms and antonyms real quick. I'm not being funny at all. Love everybody down to the floor. But I know the way that pronouns have y'all confused, gagged, and bewildered, that y'all can't be in y'all word to say y'all the way y'all say y'all are, because you would have to be able to read to be in the King James Bible like that. So in the words of Tamar Braxton, somebody lied, right? Synonyms are the words with same or similar meanings. For example, fast and quick are synonyms, right? Antonyms are words with opposite or near opposite meanings. For example, hot and cold, used to show contrast, right? Key difference, right? So you got synonyms of happy are joyful, cheerful, delightful, big, large, huge, gigantic, huh? Antonyms, opposite meaning, happy. If happy is the core word, the antonyms would be sad, depressed, miserable. If it's big, it would be small, tiny, little. There are various types of antonyms, which is what is most important. These variations that can be opposites that are supposed to mirror each other, right? So there's a graded antonym, operates on a spectrum. Warm versus cool, because the original framework was hot versus cold. These extremes. The girls' graded antonyms are very helpful when we're digging into nuance. Complementary antonyms, binary opposites with no middle ground. Dead versus alive, pass versus fail. The complementary antonyms get the girls fucked up, because a lot of times when you say things, people think that you're talking in totality. So there'll be the one person be like, well, that's not my experience. Like, you go to my Chile video, 100 Black women from the South in their 50s were like, these can't be possible components because they're not possible components for me. I didn't say everybody. I was talking about Rosanda, auntie, right? Relational antonyms, pairs that depend on each other to define a relationship, right? So these opposites, but their relationship make them important. Parent versus child, buy versus sell. You see, they're integral to each other, huh? So now that we've gone there, I want to bring out accountability. I want us to focus on accountability, the obligation, willingness, and active process of accepting responsibility for one's actions, decisions, and their consequences, fostering trust and performance. The beauty of accountability is that every single person involved in this story has a piece of accountability, because that's what y'all are looking for. Well, Dominique talk about her mama. Dominique talk about the parents. Dominique talk about this. Accountability is a big ass motherfucking bowl of 7-layer dip. Everybody can get a piece of it. It's actually beautiful, right? The synonym antonym conversation was important to me because historically, when I can't find quality antonyms to a conversation, to a word, I try my best not to utilize that word on humans, because when I'm discussing human beings, there needs to be a way to look at the spectrums of the ways that we show up as human beings. Accountability feels good to me because, right, the top synonyms for accountability are responsibility, answerability, liability, right? I'm stepping up. This is my thing. Choices were made. Things happened. Huh? Now, the synonyms for accountability are responsibility, answerability, being obligated to explain your actions, right? Liability, that's the legal space the girls get caught up at. Culpability, blameworthiness, and guilt. And then you got duty and obligation and onus and so on. Now we're going to pivot to culpability. Because most of y'all are gobsmacked that y'all like, you're trying to frame a conversation around culpability and you're struggling because, right, we're talking about blame, we're talking about guilt, we're talking about censure, we're talking about punishment, which really only works in the carceral system. But most of us have trained our ways of knowing around good, bad, and in between, right and wrong, and all of that around judge and jury. And that don't work well in real life with real people when we're really trying to make progress happen. As I said, accountability, what I love in regards to this is that I can find the antonyms that still feel like there's space for a human being to be present. Irresponsibility, unaccountability, blamelessness, right? Immunity, exemption, unresponsibility. They give me the ability to sit a human being next to it and figure out how that human being can exist in their humanhood and the conversations I want to have can exist. When you look at culpability, the synonyms are blameworthy, guilty, answerable, liable, all those things. The antonyms of culpability are innocent, blameless, faultless, guiltless, and impeccable. Perfection. So we're looking for completely imperfect, and then the antonym of what is completely imperfect is perfection. None of us exist in perfection. Now let's talk about Adina Howard. Adina Howard is 52 years old. She was born in 1973, November of 1973. You know who she's the exact same, she was born the same year as Wanya. Wanya, out of Brandy, Adina and Wanya is the oldest. Wanya is born in June of 1973, by a few months older than Adina, okay? So she, in 1995, is 22 years old as well. And at the age of 21, Freak Like Me is released in January of 1995, okay? Now, looking back, we need to think about, I assume this lady was in her 30s. I assume she, you know what I'm saying, like the revisionist history of it all, the way you see things, right? In my mind, I'm not, and I was a child at the time, but it's like, I'm not seeing her as 21, but she was. Her and Wanya were the same age. Brandy, when Freak Like Me drops, Brandy is 15, turning 16, okay? So when Wanya and Adina are 22, Brandy is 16. I want us to think about the frameworks we have when it comes to adultification of Black young people. Because the other truth is that Wanya, Brandy, and Adina were all adolescents. Why does that matter, Dominique? Because these are still young Black folks who are forming their frontal lobe, still Black folks who are thinking about choice and responsibility, who are still thinking about the impact of your actions to your life. Like, you're still forming your understanding, and they're in this industry that seeks to adultify you. Dominique, what do you mean when you say adultify? When I discuss adultification, I'm talking about the treating or perceiving of children as more mature, responsible, or culpable than they are, often imposing age-inappropriate demands and adult roles. Black children, period, are adultified. That's why someone can look at Tamir Rice being 12 years old in a park with a toy gun and shoot him with a perception that he's a grown-ass Black man, right, with a gun, and this police officer is unsafe. That is why we can look at young Black girls and believe that there's a world where a 15, 16-year-old Black girl can be so fast to where she can break the will of a 22, 25, 30, 40-year-old adult Black man. Also, patriarchy lives off the adultification of Black girls specifically because it allows them to push them into the workforce of Black womanhood faster. It allows us to dismantle any level of grace and care that children should perceive. Okay, we were at adultification, right? This hunger to see Black children as adults, Black girls, Black boys, right? The idea in our society, right, is the sanctity of life is rooted in this idea that children are precious, they're necessary. So if we rob Black children of their perception as being a child, it is easier for them to be thrown to the wolves. Now, white supremacy and systems of harm are the makers of this, and then us as Black and brown folks, we've absorbed this because honestly, a lot of y'all don't want to raise children, and the sooner that they are adultified, the sooner that you can hold them culpable for what they do. i.e. for the weary parent who don't want to feed, cook, and clean, and this, that, and the third, the quicker that your 10-year-old daughter is adultified enough to be able to make meals for you, the quicker that you can blame her for your other children not being fed when you get home that night, and not blame that nigga who wasn't there to support you and help raise the children he had with you. That there's a generation of young black men, adultification put them in the position to be incarcerated through the drug trade. Because if you look at shows like The Wire, these young, I forget the mom's name, but it was like she was dead set on her son having to get out there and sell dope because his daddy was gone, and it didn't matter that he wanted to go to school because he got to be the man of the house. My issue with comments like this is not about raising children to be mature. It's about raising children to be faux mature and mature through labor and not mature through mindset. My God. Because Wanya, Brandy, and Adina were forced to be mature through work and labor. They are superstars. They are artists. They are performers. They are workers. There was not maturity of mindset. And that's why it's important for us to hold all three of these young black folks with a level of care and support, because there's a way for them to be accountable for the actions and the choices that they made and harm they've caused. But we should always center the system and the way the system has been set up as an incubator for these things to take place, right? And there's an inherent racial bias to this adultification. A young black girl can never be fast enough to catch up to a nigga who want to be faster than her. It just don't work like that, baby. It just don't. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it because despite what black men say, black women don't like throwing niggas away. The only way to get thrown away by a black woman is to transition. Now, in regards to us, you think in the first part that I've posted, I went through accountability, culpability, talking about blame, all these other things, and talking about all of these black folks involved in this. One important component of the Wanya, Adina, and Brandy situation is Sylvia Rome, who at the time, because we still get into the calculator life, in 1995, Auntie was 43 years old. Okay? So, has a level of lived experience. She probably has been impacted by these systems her damn self, and had the power to look at this situation and not position Brandy to have to be the catalyst of Adina suffering in her career and how she's perceived by the public any more than she already was based on her music, right? And not allowing the patriarchy to work through her in service to Wanya. Because out of everyone, he came out the cleanest, right? When you think about Wanya, I would say vocally the most talented of the members of Boyz II Men. The only solo piece of music he did was the Broken Hearted song with Brandy. You gotta think, not only was Brandy a way for him to have someone who was around him, who adored him and who lived for him and who was coming in the industry and who was going to be a superstar, who had been deemed and touched by the voice herself. This was also at a time when the members of Boyz II Men was trying to figure out what was gonna happen next with them. I believe Brandy was a bridge for him to figure out what else he could do. That's why a lot of duets weren't pushed the way that the Broken Hearted duet was compared to the album version. And I believe there was great deep intentionality around that. And so when I think about Sylvia, yes, there was things that were done due to business, but there was a moment that she could have been a catalyst to shift things. And she didn't. And then if you don't look from a lens of blame, you look at accountability. There's an accountability there, but then you have to pull back the curtain and look at what Sylvia experienced and who she is. And I know it feels exhausting to people, and people feel like you're trying to make excuses. It's not about excuses, it's about seeing the whole picture. Y'all want to judge what you see, but you've only got a piece of your eye open. That's very dangerous when we're talking about human beings, specifically black folks. More importantly, I want to name that this is an opportunity where black women, black people have the opportunity to care and love on black folks through complicated situations where harm has taken place, and not get white people's permission to be kind to each other. And we're choosing to be intellectually dishonest and to feel like it has to be a side when it doesn't have to be a side, it just has to be. And with Adina and the conversations, like when you look at her with her behind the music, and you look at the stories that are coming out, also, bitch, I can't imagine me being 22 and feeling like I gotta fight for my nigga for a 16-year-old, and then he doing a song with this bitch. I would be livid. I'd have been cutting up too. Adina, she a Scorpio, I'd have been showing my ass. And also, I'm this, you're being painted, you're being promoted as this sex symbol, right? And all of these things. And when you fall into the trappings of the system, then it's, well, what does that mean about me? When Wanya talks about getting Brandy's virginity, there is a treasure hunt effect. But that's also the outcome of us only talking to young women about their bodies in a way that it's like this piece of, the virginity is a piece of gold instead of their entire being such. That's why niggas only want the virginity and not the entire being. But that's because y'all so focused on these girls keeping their hymen intact that you don't care about them keeping their heart intact. My God. So as y'all think about this, I want us to think about the fact that Adina and Wanya were the same age. Adina wasn't some 30-year-old chick fucking with this young nigga. He was 3 months older than her. And Brandy was 16 in 1995. And these stories have traveled and carried on throughout their careers. Most importantly, Adina, because her process, from her perception, her access to success was shifted, derailed due to this relationship. And a lot of the blame lands on Brandy. And when I think about culpability with Brandy, since people, I can look at my face, the culpability for Brandy is the fact that there was a point in her life where she realized the air of her being the perfect girl, how it was a tool of benefit for her. And I think it probably hit her the most right before she got pregnant with her daughter and when that whole thing with Robert took place, right? That's where a lot of the culpability comes in with Brandy, because you know it's a tool to deflect, and how people will position the princess Cinderella against the hoe. And who gets to be chosen. Once you realize that you are being used by the systems, then you become culpable to not be a tool of the system. That's where Brandy's culpability comes in. And it probably took time because her brand and her ushering into the industry was based on that, coming out of the church and so on and so forth. But when that aha came, that was important. And I think the way we've seen Brandy grow in the last year or two is the product of that. Okay, so my goal with discussing and unpacking this, the core conversation in the Brokenhearted chapter in Brandy's book, Phases. I just got my signed copy from Barnes & Nobles. This was the copy that came from Brandy and her team. And I still have another signed copy that's coming. And I have the Audible, the book. Go get the Audible book. It's one Audible credit. It's one Audible credit. It's Brandy telling the story herself. I think that really matters to people in regards to Brandy, Monica, Missy. Like there's a last generation of artists that we grew up with. And what I mean, grew up, not just their songs, but we grew up with them age-wise. They started when we were young. They're not starting artists. You know, there's some women who, the Bow Wow thing I get, because it's like they've been watching them since they were the same age, right? They're not starting artists young anymore. People aren't growing up with artists. And so not only are they the soundtrack of your life, these points, what they were experiencing, they echo where we were, right? So hearing Brandy talk is like talking with your homegirl and you ain't talked to her in a while and she's like, bitch, this is what really happened. Bitch, this is what really happened, right? And so I think that's really key. On top of like having the physical copies, the audiobook is stellar. But I'm trying to figure out how many videos I want to break this down into. But this is how I'm going to wrap up the conversation, right? The next part I'm going to come back and discuss is I'm going to include Adina Howard into the conversation, her age, our perception of who she was, and challenging our way of knowing in regards to that, and challenging us to widen the sphere of grace and understanding and care to hold both of these Black women. And then I'm going to ask us to hold all three of these Black young folks, because they all were young folks. And that's the importance of bearing witness and engaging in compassion. It's not about judge and jury and vilification. It's about bearing witness. When I have a certification as a practitioner of compassion from Stanford University, from the School of Medicine. And in my first class, our professor said, compassion is the act of bearing witness, nothing else. And it blew my mind, not only because I spent so much of my career at that point using empathy as the epicenter of the way that I would challenge people to push past their way of knowing, And then realizing that empathy, like as a person is talking, you're looking for a way for you to register the same feeling through your lived experience. And then so many people assume with empathy, there's an inherent action that needs to happen next. Hey, Brandy, what are we supposed to do with this information? Nothing. Listen, acknowledge, right? Sit with it. Sit with it. Sitting is an act, right? And so holding all three of these people in a conversation of compassion, because compassion, accountability, and challenging, all those things can exist at once, and none of them have to feel carceral, right? Next, I think it's really important for the conversation of, I'm seeing people really struggle with how we're discussing this, because oftentimes for you to verify, validate, bear witness to, church clap, other people's harm, the victimization they've experienced, the abuse they've experienced, it will call you to have to acknowledge the way that you have been victimized and the way that you have been abused. And so many of us are running our engines of life based on what we've survived as a key indicator of how strong we are. And I have a TEDx that I did in 2019, and it was a year before my medical and social transition, but I still use it to this day because it's probably, I would say, the best thing I've ever done. And the topic was resilience. And for me, I define resilience as usually just that I'm still here against the things that try to kill me. And for most of my life, I was so excited and appreciative when people would call me resilient. And in my TEDx, I say, you celebrating me for my resilience is just celebrating the fact that what was supposed to kill me didn't. If that's my entire existence, if that's the only way I'm celebrated, it's easy for people to fall into the act of constantly creating chaos in their life to overcome it, because that's the only way they are adored. Or they sit in it and they think that should be the way that everyone becomes strong. There are some people who are born physically strong, like when it comes to like our DNA and how our bodies are made up. There are some people who need to go to the gym to get their muscles a certain way, and it can take a long time for their muscles to form and so on and so forth. There are some of us, like myself, everyone talks about my calves and my legs, I don't do shit. If I was to get out here and walk for 30 days, my leg I've always been like that. Some of us are born with strength. We don't need to go through the ringer to receive it, right? Some of y'all had strength, but you didn't define it as that. And so you thought you were acquiring strength, and you were just acquiring horror stories, content. You can have strength of character without that character coming from oppression and pain and abuse. And so because many of us, that is our story, that is our song, we are not moved by other people who are sharing that. And even more so, if we are in a position to support people in becoming their best self and their strongest self, we think we should add that to the practice. I promise you would have become great without having to be abused and disrespected and fucked over. I promise you. I promise myself that. I know I would become the best version of myself no matter what, because it's in me. So many of y'all, there's no way for y'all to discuss faith in God the way that y'all do and not have faith in God the way that y'all do. God wouldn't have sent a nigga to destroy me to make me stronger. My God made me strong. So we're going to discuss that as well, and we're going to close out this piece because there's so many other things that Brandy is discussing in this book that we need to dig into. Rodney, I'm on your ass. I've been on your ass since you gave motherfucking Jennifer Lopez and Shantae Moore the same motherfucking beat.
Let me get this straight. Y'all on the internet today making excuses for Wanya Morris grooming Brandy Norwood at the ripe young age of 15. I just found out a second ago via an old interview that him and his mom wrote the theme song for Moesha. He groomed her. In the past 7 days, y'all have found ways to explain away pedophilia, domestic violence, rape. We absolutely are in a dystopian society, especially when it's like Black women saying some of the shit that's being said, because it's like these are the things that negatively affect y'all's lives the most. All of this fucking brainwashing and grooming and shit that goes on. These old ass niggas climbing on top of y'all to do their business and all of that, creating these imbalanced relationships. When it's an imbalance in power, that really grooms y'all to go into adulthood acting like children in relationships with men. You act like children, but then you also act like mothers. It's the weirdest thing. Like, you take care of the man like he's a child, but you want him to financially secure you and baby you and be all up under you all the time, like a child. Like, it's like a child. It's like you didn't create the bond as a child, so you're trying to recreate it in relationships. I don't know. But I do feel like anybody defending these things, I'm really tired of y'all. I'm really tired of y'all. I wish y'all would just shut the fuck up. Like, no, it's not going to be okay ever again for a 21, 22-year-old man to be grooming and fucking on a 15, 16-year-old girl. No, bitch, it's not the 90s anymore. Get over it. And if the man was a creep in the 90s at 21, 22, he's not going to grow out of that creepdom. He's not going to grow out of that girl. He's then going to go on to marry and have 4 children with a woman, or I'm sorry, 4 children with a woman, and name them all after him. Because I think it takes narcissistic personality, traits in order for you to fuck on a child. Even at 21, 22. Like, you're a weirdo. And so you're not going to grow out of being a weirdo. And so as you get older, you'll continue to do weirdo shit. Unchecked. Like naming all of your children the same name. Yeah, y'all, Wanya Morris has 4 kids named Wanya Morris, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I believe they may not really be talking to their daddy right now. I don't know. The last time I saw, there was a music group called Wan Moore, and they weren't really talking to him. So y'all really be out here defending assholes that y'all don't even really know about. But you just want an abusive, narcissistic personality to defend. Because that's what y'all do.
Brandy telling it all. And I'm glad she telling it all. Because a lot of these men, these older men, be sick. And they be messing with these girls. All right? And then the way they be framing stuff, she was mature for her age. That's a grown woman. She know what she was doing. Get y'all nasty behind on somewhere. Just nasty. A lot of these goddamn men in the industry sick. A lot of these men that's just out in public be sick. Just nasty. Won't ever mess with some they goddamn age. 22 messing with a 15 or 16-year-old at the time. So I'm glad she coming out telling her truth and exposing this nonsense. Heck is wrong with some of these dudes out here, man. A lot of these dudes out here. And then the way he was on that Instagram one time trying to say we was young. No, she was young. You were an adult. You were an adult. She was young. Shut your nasty behind up. Just nasty.
In her new memoir titled Phases, Brandy confirms that her and Wanya Morris of Boyz II Men dated when she was only 16 and he was 22. Even though in the past, he said that they did not start dating until she was of legal age. Now, rumors about them dating when Brandy was underage have always been circulating. However, they were never confirmed. In fact, Wanya Morris on a live in 2021 said that there were no lies there and that him and Brandy did not start dating until she was of legal age. And he even said that people could ask Brandy and she would say the same thing. Ironically enough, no one needed to ask Brandy because she penned about it in her new memoir. Brandy explains that their relationship initially started as him being a musical mentor for her and that he took advantage of that situation and had her believing that she was actually in love. She confirms that the two of them were intimate and that when they were intimate, he was a selfish lover. And he just wanted someone who was too young to know that she was being used. She also shared that the two of them had plans to go public once she turned 18, but before that could happen, she caught him fooling around with an assistant, and he confessed to having other infidelities during their relationship.
This Brandy topic is something that so many girls in our community go through. Like, it's so sad. From generation to generation, this has been happening and still happening. And so many girls, including myself, like, I met my baby daddy whenever I was 14. I got pregnant whenever I was 16. And he was 21 as well. So, and just listening to all the think pieces and conversations, it's bringing up a whole lot of emotions. Like, it's been years at this point now, but you think you
are halfway over stuff or you've moved past it, but just seeing so many women, I'm reading comments too. So many women have gone through this.
Let's jump into my favorite part of all of the content I post on YouTube. And that's just my thoughts, where I get to kind of express what I feel about whatever we have read or gone over. So let's get into it. So Brandy recently released her memoir called Phases. And a very necessary conversation has come out of this memoir that she's written. And understand that when conversations like this come up, a lot of people rush to argue about blame before they slow down enough to recognize behavior. And that is exactly why so many women miss red flags in real time. The real value in unpacking this situation of what happened with Brandy and Wanya Morris, and even the public fallout that touched Adina Howard, is that it gives women language, it gives context, it gives a clearer framework for identifying what manipulation can look like when it does not arrive in an obviously violent or cartoonishly evil form, right? Because that is what we are fed and socialized to believe. That's the only way it occurs, and that's false. Sometimes it arrives dressed up as mentorship. Sometimes it arrives as adoration or admiration. Sometimes it arrives as secrecy, promises, confusion, and a man making a girl or woman feel chosen before he starts wearing down her clarity. That is why this conversation matters. And I have to admit, I was very disturbed by the amount of Black women who were rushing to say that Brandy is a liar and that she was fast, because those are the same Black women who do not hold men who are predatory toward girls accountable. And likely those are the same Black women who are rushing to be on the front pew of church every Sunday. Those women have a lot of misogynoir. They have a lot of internalized hatred for themselves, a lot of internalized misogyny. And those mindsets are very clear. These situations are important and should be discussed, because it will let you know as clear as rain that these are women where girls are unsafe around, and honestly where you are unsafe around, because they will always side with men. They're very male-centered. So let's jump into like the 5 really important points that I want to bring forth through this conversation that I've seen going on about this particular situation in Brandy's memoir with Wanya Morris of Boys to Men. And I want you to really think about these and take these away. And I want these to help you start healing if you were ever groomed. And please seek out the services of a licensed mental health professional. I am a coach. I am not a therapist. Things like these need to be unpacked with a licensed mental health professional, because this is some deep stuff. But I also want you to take these points away in this conversation away and think about any young ladies, girls, teenagers in your life that maybe you could provide support to, or you see the signs of grooming happening to them and you can, intervene as a protector. So let's get started. Point number 1. Predatory men do not look for bad girls, air quote. They look for access, admiration, and vulnerability. One of the biggest lies women are taught is that danger only finds girls who are reckless, wild, fast, very popular word in the Black community, or obviously troubled. But that is not how predatory behavior really works. Predatory men are not always scanning for the loudest or the most chaotic target. Many times they are scanning for proximity, trust, admiration, innocence, and emotional openness. Remember those girls in high school that were real quiet, low key, maybe quirky, maybe, didn't have a group of friends, and they're the ones that ended up pregnant by this way older boyfriend? Those were the reasons why. He was looking for vulnerability. He was looking for innocence and emotional openness. And because that young lady was probably not receiving those things from her peer group because of whatever reason, he had to end. He was like a fox waiting outside a hen house, right? Just creeping in. These are the men that are looking for someone they can impress, influence, or quietly shape. This is part of what makes this conversation about Brandy so important, around this situation that Brandy was in so important. She is and always has been very talented. She's gifted, and she is really publicly loved. And during the time when this was occurring, she was very much in the spotlight. She had done several shows, sitcoms. She had released albums. She had gone on tour. We knew who Brandy was, and she was like this young black teenager who was really making waves and overcoming a lot of barriers to success. And she had a pretty clean image. And she was surrounded by adults in the entertainment industry, and yet none of that automatically protected her. In fact, we realize, hindsight is 2020, that how predatory, right, the entertainment industry really is, especially towards women and children, but especially children. A man does not need a girl to be broken down in order to target her, right? He just needs access and a reason to believe she will trust what he says. That is the lesson. Women have to stop assuming that accomplishment, beauty, talent, or being mature for your age creates immunity. It doesn't. A man being drawn to innocence, adoration, and someone who sees him as special is not automatically flattering. Sometimes that is exactly the point. He is setting that young lady up, and a man could be, setting you up. But we're specifically talking about predators. So in underage girls, a man is going to have proximity to set that scenario up, to set those emotions up so he can take advantage. As a teaching tool, this matters because women need to start asking, is this man drawn to mutual connection, or is he drawn to being admired by someone easier to control? And really, the patriarchy impresses upon men to be attracted to helplessness. And that is why, in my opinion, especially with these files that have been released over the past couple months and all of the horrendous things in them, the men who had so much power were attracted to so much innocence and helplessness in the children that were harmed because they were predators and they were attracted to that. And all of the parameters were being hit: proximity, innocence, and they were being abused. So there was emotional openness there. And these men took advantage of that. Point number 2. Future promises are often a manipulation tactic, not proof of love. Now, on a regular dating, journey, women will see this. This is future faking, right? But predators do this as well. This is another major lesson here, is that the dangers of future promising or future faking. Men do it with underage women. Predators do it with underage girls. And men who are very insincere and want to waste your time do it with you in dating. This is when a man asks a woman or girl to tolerate something harmful, confusing, or hidden in the present because he is dangling a promise about the future. He tells her to wait. He tells her the timing is not right. He tells her one day everything will make sense. He tells her when this happens, when that changes, when the world is ready, in this case, when she is older, the relationship can be real and visible, right? There are women, not talking about predators, segue into regular relationships, who choose to do this as a mistress or a side piece. Do not fall for it. Any man who is future faking, leave him alone. Ladies, if you have a teenager, a girl in your life, a young lady in your life that you can talk to, that's confiding in you, and she has a guy that's future faking with her, even if he's her age, but especially if he's not, you need to tell her that is the tactic of a predator. That is not romance. It's a control tactic. What makes future promising or future faking so powerful is that it keeps the other person emotionally invested while forcing them to ignore what is happening right in front of their face. In Brandy's situation, the idea that things would eventually be public once she reached a certain age created a fantasy for her to hold on to. And men don't stop using this tactic. Wanya is a predator here, and he did this in this situation, but grown men do this to grown women all the time that they want to string along. Married men do this to women that they are dating outside their marriage to keep them attached and string along. But that kind of promise benefits the older or the more powerful person in the scenario. Wanya got access in private while postponing accountability in public. Basically, he was keeping the con going. A healthy man does not require silence, hiding, waiting, or self-betrayal in order to love openly. So understand that it is a critical point. If you are ever dealing with this, or you have a point of any interaction in a girl or teenager's life, and she's telling you that a guy's doing this to her, right? you need to protect yourself, and you need to impress upon girls and teenagers that they need to protect themselves. It is not flattery at all. Any promise that requires a woman, a teenager, a girl to override her present discomfort for the sake of a someday should be examined very carefully, because the question is never just what is he promising. The real question is, what is he asking her to endure or hide while she waits? Point number 3, secrecy is not intimacy when the relationship has to be hidden for a reason. And in this case, Wanya was 22 and Brandy was 16. For legal purposes, the relationship had to be hidden. A lot of women confuse secrecy with emotional depth. Let me say that again. A lot of women, teenagers and girls, confuse secrecy with emotional depth. They think nobody understands us, or what we have is private and special, or we are protecting something important. We are protecting what we're building. But secrecy is not the same as intimacy, especially when the secrecy exists because the truth would make the man look wrong, or in this case, it is illegal. That distinction matters. When a grown man knows a relationship cannot withstand public exposure, that is not star-crossed love. This is not Romeo and Juliet. That is concealment. That is intentional harm that he is causing that other party. It means he understands the optics. He understands the legality of it. He understands the power imbalance and the consequences well enough to know this cannot live in the light. And if he is still moving forward anyway, that tells you something about his character and a lack of integrity. It tells you he is willing to benefit from access while avoiding public accountability. That is part of why Wanya allegedly presenting one version of events publicly, while Brandy later described something very different, hits so hard. Private closeness paired with public denial is a major red flag. It shows a willingness to let the other person carry the confusion, the emotional attachment, and often the shame, as well as the blame, right? While this man, keeps his image intact. This is such an important teaching point for women to understand when assessing men. If a man's behavior only works in darkness, vagueness, technicalities, or hidden language, then the relationship is not safe just because it feels emotionally intense. Sometimes intensity is the very thing distracting women from the truth. Ladies who jump in the bed with men too quickly, and this is not a judgment call on if you like to have sex, but understand he knows he's good in bed. That's probably the only thing he's good at, because he knows it's the quickest way to get you off your game to allow him access. Be very, very wary of a man who's trying to jump into bed with you on the first night. Men need to be just as wary of women try to do it, because they understand they are good at that thing, and that thing allows them a gateway to manipulate their target, right? And Wanya did the very same thing here. And the same thing goes on in dating, in, appropriate relationships, age-appropriate relationships. Point number 4, manipulative men often use a cycle of praise, comparison, distance, and confusion. Many women are taught to look for bad behavior only in its loudest forms. They are watching for yelling, cruelty, or obvious disrespect. But manipulation often starts much softer than that. It starts with special attention. It starts with feeling chosen. It starts with him making someone feel seen in a way no one else seems to see them. Then once the attachment is formed, the behavior begins to shift. Love bombing. Yeah, same mechanism. That is where confusion becomes the control mechanism. Once again, a manipulative man may praise a woman, then compare her to other women. He may make her feel deeply desired, then suddenly become distant. He may become hard to reach, inconsistent, emotionally slippery, or unpredictable. He may subtly introduce insecurity into the relationship after first establishing himself as the source of validation. And once that happens, the woman often starts working harder to recover the closeness she felt at the beginning, not realizing this whole thing was set up to fail and it's a game. That pattern is incredibly important when looking at Brandy's reflections about this relationship. The comparisons, the emotional inconsistency, the difficulty reaching him, the cheating, the hindsight realization that the signs were glaring. All of that paints a picture that women should study carefully, because this is how manipulation often works. First, the man makes her feel chosen, then he destabilizes her, then she starts trying to earn back what he freely gave at the start. That is not chemistry, that is not passion, that is emotional conditioning. And women need language for that, because too many of us have been taught to call that love. And the best thing for you to do as a grown woman, if you are experiencing this with a man, block his number and never speak to him again. Cut that cycle clean off. Yes, it may hurt emotionally, but guess what? You got good insurance. Go see a therapist. Do not allow somebody to do this to you. Point number 5. When people blame the younger girl and protect the older man, they are revealing a dangerous misunderstanding of power. And I don't really think it's a misunderstanding, but we're going to go with that. This may be the most important lesson of all. Whenever people start saying a teenage girl knew better than a grown man while softening the role of the older man, what they are really revealing is that they do not understand power, or they do understand it and they are comfortable excusing it when men misuse it because they're male-centered and they uphold patriarchy. We see this a lot in the Black community in the church. We see this a lot. We see this a lot in families. Reflect. A child or teenager being talented, attractive, outspoken, ambitious, or emotionally invested does not erase a power imbalance. It does not make her equally responsible for what a grown man chooses to do. And this is especially important in conversations involving Black girls because adultification happens. That is part of the stigma placed on Black people in this white patriarchal society. Everybody wants to adultify Black children. People look at Black girls and project maturity onto them in ways that strip them of innocence, grace, and protection. Suddenly, a child is treated like a co-conspirator in her own exploitation. This is especially true in church. Women are some of the most vicious doing it. If it's a young lady, a girl who hit puberty early and she happens to be busty and she happens to be filling out, these old women are calling her fast for puberty, and they're not slapping the taste out of the mouths of the grown men who are making lewd comments about this girl's body. That is why the broader conversation matters. Brandy was a teenager. Wanya was an adult, point blank, period. Adina Howard, singer at the time, freak like me, very, very, if you know, you know, from the mid-90s, who was around Wanya's age, also became part of a public dynamic where women bore fallout differently than the man at the center of it. A lot of people were mad at her. A lot of people blamed her, said terrible things about her. And it's rumored that Sonia, Brandy's mother, is the one who had hand in ending her career. That is how these systems work. Men's choices get minimized, while girls and women absorb the shame, blame, public scrutiny, and career consequences. As a relationship coach, I really want to ask women to focus the accountability on the man. The first question should never be, why did she go along with it? The real question is, who had more power, more life experience, and more knowledge, more freedom, and more ability to stop this? That question usually tells the truth much faster than the public narrative does. So some closing reflections I have on this, and I know this is a little longer than usual because it's such an important conversation that we need to have, is that it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary to have it because harmful male behavior rarely introduces itself honestly, right? It does not usually say, I'm here to manipulate you. It often shows up looking like mentorship, chemistry, protection, desire, emotional intensity, or connection that feels deeper than words. That is why women need frameworks, not just feelings. Feelings can be real and still be used against someone. Attention can feel flattering and still be unsafe. A promise can sound beautiful and still be a trap, right? So the lesson is not just to look at whether a man is charming, talented, successful, or emotionally compelling. The lesson is to assess whether he is honest, age appropriate, transparent, consistent, accountable, and safe. Because a man who requires secrecy, confusion, waiting, image management, or emotional self-abandonment is already telling on himself, and women deserve to know how to hear it. If you want, feel free to leave your comments below, because I think this is such an impactful thing. If you have gone through something like this, if you have been groomed, if you have had, know somebody who went through this, I'm really curious about your feedback, because this is a conversation that is long overdue, and we need to have it open and honestly, and really get also a clear beat on the women who are dangerous and are unsafe women to be around. It's not just about these predators and the men being unsafe. It's about a lot of women probably in your life that are unsafe too. What makes conversations like this so important is that they help women stop confusing intensity with safety, attention with love, and promises with character. A man can be talented, charming, desired, and still be manipulative. A relationship can feel deep and still be unhealthy. And sometimes the biggest act of self-protection is being honest about what something really was, instead of clinging to the version that made it easier to survive. If this is the kind of lens that helps deepen discernment and make dating decisions with more clarity, care, and confidence, there's more coaching-centered support, reflection tools, and exclusive content available inside my coffee community. Link in the description box below. I would love for you to join us there.